people, what's the most messed up thing you've done for money that you'd never admit in real life? Story 1. I was out playing violin for a place for like $30 an hour, which was something I liked to do for a pastime. It was always fun to do. One day, I was offered $1,200 to go to a get-together and play the violin there. So, I did that. Well, this gathering was an interesting one. A lot of people showed up and started eating, drinking, partying, and having a good old time. I was playing with other people who had banjos and drums, and this girl who was clapping spoons together for some odd reason. As the night went on, I was still jamming out when I saw people bring out a giant wooden cross. I thought, what the heck are they doing? We were asked to stop playing for a bit, and the organizer stepped up and started his speech. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the thing you've all been waiting for. After that, everyone started putting on white robes and hoods. That's when it hit me. I'd been playing music at a KKK queer rally, but hey, I was getting paid good money to do it. Let me tell you, they made some bomb fried chicken. I came home with $5,000. They even gave me a robe and hood. After that night, people have asked me to participate in family gatherings. I am always concerned when that stuff will happen again. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I drank a full glass of sink water that had been sitting stagnant for months. It was gray and moldy. We used to party at my friend's house in our late teens. He had the cool mom who would buy alcohol, and in his house, anything went, literally anything. Over time, the house fell into complete disarray from almost daily teen parties. One night, while drinking in the kitchen, someone dared me to drink the sink water. The drain had been backed up for a long time. I got about $200 and chugged it. I was pretty intoxicated, so it didn't bother me at the time, but thinking about it now makes my stomach turn from the smell. We had to party in the kitchen that night because his mom's dog had passed away in her room. She left him wrapped in a blanket for a couple of weeks, and the smell was so bad we couldn't be near it. There were probably 20 people at the party that night. Story 3. I pretended to be a gay bartender at a club in Atlanta. At the time, I was a straight, broke college student, but I somehow scrounged up $500 to get training at a bartending school. I was eager to pay back the tuition, so I took a job anywhere, bars, restaurants, and even the airport. So when I interviewed for a shady job at a club, I didn't ask any questions. Fast forward to 2 a.m. on my first night, and I see a guy dragging his package across the bar. I turned to my coworker and asked if it was sanitary, and he just laughed. I realized he was gay too after about the 10th time he had to squeeze past me to get something on the other side of the bar. I felt pretty uncomfortable, but the tips were amazing, so I went back when they called me the next day. I never told anyone I was straight, even though customers flirted with me relentlessly. I had just broken up with the girl who had taken my V-card, so I always said I recently got out of a bad relationship. I received a lot of tips and phone numbers while working there. Story 4. Back in the day, I had a friend around 17 or 18 who was really into those free iPod.com and freeXbox.com style sites from the early 2000s. You had to get people to sign up for free trial offers, and if you got enough friends, you could score a free iPod, Xbox, TV, or computer. He was skeptical, so he tested it by having 5 real adults he knew sign up. And sure enough, he actually got his free iPod. But these sites were clever. Often you couldn't use the same person for multiple trials, even with different credit cards, and only a few offers were genuinely free or risk-free. So my friend needed to find another group of people willing to complete free trial offers. Around that time, Yahoo chat rooms and custom Yahoo chat rooms were still a thing. Unsurprisingly, some of these rooms were full of vile people looking for underage girls or boys to cyber with, trade pictures, or even meet in person. My friend realized that most of these people were older, gullible, and easily titillated. It wouldn't take much to get them to sign up for free trials, so he created a screen name and posed as a woman in these chats. When dozens of men messaged him, my friend, in his best impersonation of a girl, would chat with them, filtering out the ones who weren't serious and focusing on the persistent ones. He'd talk with them for 5 or 10 minutes, then ask for a favor, signing up for a free trial because I really need a new iPod. It worked. My friend ended up with a free iPod, a free Xbox, a free desktop PC, and a free monitor. He then sold most of them for cash. One of the men he chatted with was so persistent about meeting the fake persona that my friend ended up reporting him to the FBI. The agency came and took a statement from my friend, as the man was a known offender. Story 5. I spent 5 years in China teaching ESL. In addition to the school I worked for, I took private students. One was a successful but bored plastic surgeon. Most of his business consisted of the same 3 surgeries, so he wanted to learn English to break the monotony. He would call me at random times, often with little or no notice, to ask if I could come over for a lesson. One night, he called me to come to his office, which was fairly normal, but when I arrived, the nurse handed me booties and a hairnet and told me to scrub my hands. Before I knew it, I was in the operating room giving him an English lesson while he performed a nose job. I kid you not. I barely made it through. The sight of the surgery made me lightheaded, and I was trying to follow along at the same time. I am pretty much scarred for life. He wasn't performing surgery on me. It was someone else's nose job. I was just an observer. The operation violated every known procedure for sterility and cleanliness. China is basically the Wild West. Story 6. In my mid-20s, I found myself bored and came across a gig on Craigslist. It turned out a dancer needed a safe driver to take her to gigs. Not thinking much of it, I contacted her and spent the rest of the morning driving her around. At one appointment, she came downstairs, walked up to my truck, handed me $20, and said she needed more rubbers. I was taken aback, but thought, what the heck? So I went to the local pharmacy, now almost 6 a.m., and bought 2 boxes for her. I brought them back, handed them over, and then waited for another 2 hours. She eventually came out, and I drove her back home, where she paid me $150. I felt wrong taking the money, knowing she was being taken advantage of and still had to pay me, but I took it anyway. She seemed pleased, saying I was a pleasant young man and driver. One of the weirdest occurrences for me by far. Story 7. I was younger, barely out of high school, just starting to feel the effects of a mental illness I wouldn't be diagnosed with for another year. I was working for an older woman as a live-in companion and caretaker. The job was boring, she was annoying, and I was young, very different from who I am now. Her husband had passed away, leaving her a wealthy widow. She only used cash and kept it around the house, often leaving her purse right next to her lazy chair in the living room. I started by going through her wallet, and by the time I got caught, I was rifling through the top drawer where she kept envelopes full of cash. I got caught because, after 6 months of taking maybe $60 at a time, I took an entire envelope of $100 bills. Before that morning, I had only taken a couple of hundred. She never kept hard cash in her purse. There must have been at least $6,000 in that dresser drawer, and the envelope I took had $1,000 in it. She had started noticing the missing cash a few months earlier, but with her slight memory issues, she thought she was just misplacing it. Her kids set up a hidden nanny cam, and I got caught on camera taking $10 from her wallet. They confronted me, and I admitted it, but only for $10. I lied, saying it was the first time. I had heard her talk about misplacing money and wanted to see if I could get away with taking some. Her kids believed me and asked me to move out while she was at church the next day. I returned the envelope in full and haven't spoken to her since, except to apologize over the phone and in a letter. I've always regretted it. made strides to be a better person, and sought help for my mental illness. Story 8. A coworker once told someone at work that he would eat anything for money. He claimed he had eaten cat poop for $100. People called him a liar, and he said he would eat anything gross we found for the right price. One day in the shop, someone found a giant dead moth, wingspan roughly 6 inches, and asked him how much he'd charge. He said $15, and we paid him. He ate it with no problem. Gross, but not too bad. Over time, we kept pushing the limits. A flattened frog for $20, a moldy piece of lemon found outside in a cup of sweet tea for $30, raccoon poop for $33, and some change. So, we kept trying to find something he wouldn't eat. Near the shop I used to work at, there was a pond my company planned to fill in to put up a new building. The pond had fish, frogs, and turtles, and they needed to pump it out. One day, while picking up trash around the pond, we found a dead catfish, about 15 pounds, a pretty good-sized one. For $42.50, another coworker cut out the fish's tongue, and my gross coworker ate it. On its own, it was disgusting, but the smell and the fact that the mouth was swarming with maggots made it worse. It was a hot summer day. The stench was awful, and I was watching him. I gagged almost every time he ate something, but this one nearly knocked me out. He chewed it up and went about his day, acting proud. He used to record all of his stunts and post them on YouTube, but had to take the videos down when our plant managers found out and were furious. Story 9. When I was 14, I was spending the night at a friend's house with several others. His mom left $500 on the kitchen counter and told him to take it to the landlord's house in the morning, then left for her night job. I got up in the middle of the night, took the money, rode my bike all the way home to stash it, and then rode back to go to bed at my friend's house. In the morning, I joined the search for the missing money, feigning concern. As you can probably guess, we couldn't find it. There was a lot of tension in that group, with accusations flying for weeks. Eventually, I started dropping those friends, telling them I couldn't continue to deal with the ongoing drama. Reflecting on my life, this is probably one of the lowest things I've ever done. I've done dumber things, meaner things, and more selfish things, but this was just one of the lowest. The money stayed hidden for nearly a year before I spent any of it. I had just seen the movie Goodfellas and learned not to make big purchases right after a score. When I did start spending it, I timed it around occasions like my birthday and Christmas, so no one would question it. Story 10. I was a male S-worker for about 18 months. It just kind of happened. My girlfriend had broken my heart, so I threw myself into the gym. I bartended at a restaurant near a massive office park, surrounded by big hotels. After a few months of going to the gym 5 to 6 days a week, I started getting propositioned constantly by female bar customers. Most of them were traveling business professionals staying at the hotels near my restaurant. I was being slipped hotel room keys almost every night. One evening, a woman shamelessly begged me to come up to her room after my shift. Half joking, half serious, I asked her how much it would be worth to her. When she paid her tab, she left a $150 tip on a $35 to $40 bill and told me she expected me when I got off. That's how it started, and I just ran with that angle every time a woman asked me to go back to her room. The women ranged from moderately to very attractive, mostly in their mid to late 40s. A few were younger, and a couple were as old as 65. I even had repeat customers, regulars, really. Most of the women I would have slept with for free, but there were times I'd leave one hotel room and head straight to another. I think a lot of them got a thrill out of paying for it, while I was there solely for their entertainment. Honestly, nothing too crazy happened. Occasionally, someone would request something unusual. I eventually stopped because the hotels started catching on, and I was worried about being reported. Now I am married, out of shape, and never get propositioned. Story 11. I once sold a pair of my worn socks on eBay. This was about 16 years ago. A friend sent me a link to a closed auction for worn men's socks that had gone for around $200. When I saw it, I thought, I have a whole drawer full of socks. So I listed my worn socks. The listing was taken down a few times before I got it right. It had to be a private auction, and I had to state in the body of the listing that the items had been cleaned in accordance with eBay standards. I took pictures of my feet in the socks, out of the socks, and with the socks next to my bare feet. I also noticed that the socks being sold were men's dress socks. These were like the ones you'd wear with loafers. I got more inquiries on that auction than any other I had ever posted. People asked if I would wear the socks until the end of the auction, if I would customize them, and if I would send them in individual Ziploc bags. I said yes to everything. The auction closed at a little over $30. I promptly placed each sock in its own Ziploc bag and packed them to be shipped. This was before PayPal, so the winner had to send me a money order. I received the money order, but there was no return address. I reached out to the winner 3 times, but he never responded with an address. Story 12. I was bartending at a very busy city nightclub, catering to the after-work Friday crowd. In a small back bar next to the dance floor, it was just me and one other staff member, and our section was as busy as a bar could get. This smarmy guy was leaning all over the bar trying to chat up girls and taking up all the space so no one else could get served. I asked him once, twice, 3 times for his order, and each time he turned away to tell a joke or some slimy pickup line. Total knobhead behavior. Then he pulls out his wallet, takes his eyes off me again to look at a girl, and about $1,000 in $100 bills falls out and lands right in my ice well. Time slows down. I speed up. In a nanosecond, I bury the cash under the ice. He looks back, sensing something, but can't tell what. I politely offer to pay for his drink if he wants to finish his order. He does, takes his drinks, and leaves. I wait 10 minutes and recover the cash, along with a baggie of powder that had fallen into the ice. Well, by the end of the night, my fellow bartender and I had finished the powder and spent the cash. Story 13. I was flat broke, walking through the grocery store, trying to figure out how to feed my wife and myself for the week until payday, with only $7 in my pocket. I turned down an aisle to look at the canned beans and spotted a $20 bill on the ground. Nobody was around, so I grabbed it and slipped it into my pocket. A flood of relief washed over me as I stood there for a moment, trying to decide how to spend it. Then a father and his son turned down the aisle, looking worried, scanning the floor as they searched. "I am sure it's around here somewhere, we'll find it," the father told his son. As they passed, he asked me, "I am sorry you didn't happen to see some money on the ground, did you?" Without a second's hesitation, I replied, "No, sorry, didn't see anything." They moved on. I got my groceries and went home. I've done a lot of crappy things in my life, but that one still sticks with me. Story 14. I got $160 to soil my pants during a first-year chemistry final exam. I finished the exam to the best of my ability, then sat there for a solid 20 minutes trying to force it. I kept getting too scared to let it out, until finally a little came out, followed by enough to make a big wet spot. Phase 2 involved calling over the professor. It was a smaller university, so class sizes were small, and you got to know your professors well, which didn't make this any easier. The professor was pretty new, only in his 2nd year of teaching in Canada after coming from South Africa, and a genuinely nice guy who had probably never dealt with this before. I could tell because when I called him over and he asked if there was a problem, and I showed him the wet spot, he was shocked. In desperation, he asked, "Oh my God, it's okay. What do you want to do?" I said I just wanted to get out of there, so he nodded, grabbed my exam, and I rushed out of the room, collapsing in a fit of laughter once I was out of earshot. I met up with everyone involved in the bet, collected my money, and was forced to go to dinner at Boston Pizza in my soaked pants. 2 weeks later, the grades came back. I figured I deserved a B+, maybe an A- if I was lucky. The poor, traumatized professor gave me a sympathetic A+. I still see him at the gym sometimes, 10 years later, and I really hope he doesn't recognize me. Story 15. I jumped from a mall platform and broke my ankle. My local mall has 3 floors with a massive opening in the plaza for escalators and elevators, but there's also a lot of open space. It's about 10 meters down, and my friend offered me $20 to jump. I had a small reputation in our friend group for being able to take long jumps, and I am not afraid of heights, so I said yes and jumped, like an idiot. To be fair, we were a little high, and when I am high, I get incredibly impulsive. Surprisingly, it was only a minor break, but I was badly bruised and also sprained my elbow while slipping sideways and cracking my ankle. The rest of the momentum threw me to the floor with my elbow under me. I got that $20. I blacked out at some point, and later found it in a card on a bedside table at the hospital. Story 16. I once knew an alcoholic named Rick. One of my best friends sometimes stayed at Rick's place, so I occasionally got to talk to him. He was a real deviant. I don't remember exactly how it came up, but my friend Rick and I made an agreement. He would pay us $50 each if we had fun with his little guy. We knew he was serious. He even showed us a box of supplies he had bought for the purpose: a pack of cigarettes, some nylon rope, a pair of needle-nose pliers, firecrackers, and some darts. So we agreed, but only if he paid us first. We'll do it on the weekend, we said. When the weekend came, we'd show up, tell him he hadn't paid us in advance yet, and schedule for another day. He kept forgetting that he had already paid us and kept giving us money. Being teenagers still in high school, it was an easy source of free booze money. This went on for a month or two until I moved away. The last I heard, animal control came and took the feral cats he cared for around his house. After that, he ended himself. Story 17. I stole $100 from my dad when I was probably 10, right before a family vacation, not knowing he had pulled out exactly $1,000 in cash for vacation activities. I wasn't sure how I could spend a $100 bill without my parents noticing, so I hid it in a book on a shelf upstairs. It stayed there for about 6 years before I remembered it, and then I spent it on powder. 16-year-old me was even more of a jerk than 10-year-old me. Working basic labor didn't help my attitude. The weird part was that we were actually pretty well off, upper middle class, but both my parents had grown up poor, so they hoarded money and had strict rules about clothes, food, and just about everything. My dad, the main earner, was the only one who could buy whatever he wanted. The rest of us didn't matter. The year the PlayStation came out, he was probably 50. He bought one for himself and said we could use it sometimes if we asked. I think he played it only once. Later, he retired from his fancy VP job, invested in a cheap haircutting franchise, put me to work at 12, spent all his retirement money and mine and my mom's free time on his stores, went bankrupt, and stole money from my college fund just to keep himself afloat and barely keep the family going. So this is also the story of how I ended up $40,000 in debt. For some reason, I still feel bad about those $100 though. I stopped doing powder, and now, at 29, my life is finally on track, totally sober, with a good job, not depressed for the first time ever, and getting married in October to the man of my dreams. My mom left my dad when I went to college, and she's much happier now, in remission from her MS for 12 years. Looking ahead, with plans to become a parent in the next couple of years, I have a long, detailed list of what not to do when it comes to parenting. Story 18. I was out west on a spring break trip through our college. On the way back, we stopped in Mesquite, Nevada. There are casinos there, and one of the guys on the trip managed to get us 2 rooms comped. We had a 20-hour drive the next day, and since I couldn't drive, I went down to the casino for the night. I sat at a blackjack table with about $100. I was a broke college student, mostly just passing the time, not trying to make money. The minimum bet was 5. I don't remember if there was a maximum. A guy comes in and sits next to me with a stack of chips worth over $20,000. In about 3 hours, he loses it all. The dealers tried to get him to walk away. The pit boss tried to get him to walk away. Then some guy in a black suit with a gold name tag walks up, says, "If he wants to play, you let him play," stares them all down, and walks away. The poor guy was a complete wreck, but he pulled out a massive stack of bills and bought back in for another 14 grand, only to lose that over the next 2 hours. Finally, he got up and walked away. I went outside for a smoke and noticed a line of payphones. He was on one of them, mumbling all of it into the receiver, one hand on the wall, head hung low, hair a mess, just completely defeated. The woman on the other end went ballistic. I could hear her shouting. Finally, he said, "Please, I just need you to wire me enough to get home." Then he hangs up the phone, turns, and sees me standing there. She hung up. "She told me not to come home," he says, tears welling up. He asks me for a few bucks to buy a drink, so I give him 20, and he heads back inside. I watch him approach the bar, then stop and look at the tables. I can tell he's wrestling with a decision. I kid you not, he takes one last look at the bar, then turns back to a blackjack table, puts his $20 down, breaks it into 4 $5 chips, and loses them on the very first hand. I've thought about that guy a lot over the years. It was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. I wonder if he ended up okay or what happened to him afterward. I wonder if the woman on the other end of the line ever spoke to him again, or if he might have done something desperate that night. I actually feel like I owe that man. Whenever I felt like my life was falling apart, I'd think of him and remember that there are people who have ruined themselves even worse. When I was deep into drinking, I thought of him and could empathize with his situation. It helped me get it a little more under control. I still drink too much sometimes, but at least now I remember the day before. Story 19. I was at the pub playing poker and lost early. Nothing unusual. While standing behind a friend, I noticed a $20 bill on the floor next to him. I knew it wasn't his. He's poorer than me and also pays my bills, but that's a different story. I did the classic cover it with my foot, drag it closer, casually drop my wallet so nobody suspects anything move. Success. Not my finest moment, but $20 is $20. I was waiting tables when a big high school group came in for lunch. One kid had that gag toy where you attach a bill to a fishing line with a spring-loaded mechanism that snaps it back when someone tries to grab it. He had a $10 bill on it and had already fooled a couple of other servers who warned us at the side station. I told them to watch me. I walked by the table, keeping my eyes straight ahead, but spotted the bill in my peripheral vision. Just as I got there, I stepped on the line, bent over, yanked the bill off, and looked the kid dead in the eye as I pocketed it and kept walking. His friends went nuts, laughing at his misfortune, and I made $10. I'd do it again. Story 20. I was fresh out of the Navy and had just earned my LPN license. Pay in the area wasn't bad, but LPN jobs were starting to dry up. I was planning to go back for my BSN or try to get into a PA program, and moving back home wasn't an option. I needed the best cash I could get. So I went to an agency, as most in my position would. I worked a few shifts in nursing homes, but I was desperate to work somewhere that didn't smell like urine. The agency told me, since I was one of their better nurses, I had 2 options, the county jail or a factory. Pay was roughly the same, though you got an extra $2 per hour for the jail because, well, it was a jail. I decided to take the factory, at least those people were there willingly. This factory was a sweatshop. I had seen a few others, and most had people reasonably happy to be there and working in safe conditions. This was pure Dickensian crap. I have no idea how it wasn't being fined by OSHA. I expected to treat standard workplace injuries, backs hurt from lifting, hands caught between objects. Nope, the place was a sauna in the summer, and no water was allowed on the floor at all. Breaks were severely restricted. People were dropping left and right. When we raised the concern, management told us very clearly that they were aware of the situation, and our job was to patch up those who passed out so they could return to work, not to worry about preventing injury and illness in the first place. The RN quit in protest. I stayed because the money was too good to pass up. I had also been denied admission to the RN program at the local community college and was waitlisted for the BSN program at a nearby college. I needed to keep working and saving cash. I stayed longer than I should have and ultimately left nursing entirely to become an insurance adjuster. Still, I look back on that one factory as a time when I was absolutely part of the problem. Story 21. I worked at Compusa during the closing and liquidation. Everything was discounted by type and percentage on a daily basis. On Mondays, computers would get a discount. On Tuesdays, software would get a discount. This was back when thumb drives were still really expensive, and 1 gigabyte was huge. While moving stock from the back, I found a full, unopened box of 1 gigabyte CompUSA brand thumb drives. I decided to hide the box above the drop ceiling in the stockroom. Then, on the very last day the store was open, I pulled the box out and took it to customer service to purchase. By that time, they had reached around 90% off. I bought a box of 101 gigabyte thumb drives for about $2 a drive. 3 weeks later, I sold them all on Craigslist for $15 each, which was still roughly a quarter of the regular price. I see it as kind of messed up because there were tons of people who wanted cheap thumb drives, and I kept telling them we were out of stock, same as the liquidator. He saw via the inventory system that a box should be there but wasn't, and he ended up writing them off as stolen. When I brought them up and he saw them, he got a really pissed look and asked where I found them. I told him the box had fallen between a shelf and a wall with a bunch of store displays piled on top. Story 22. In college, my friend and I would go into the student mail center, where everyone's P.O. boxes were, open a bunch of random ones, and take cards or other items. There were no cameras, and the mail center was located in the dining hall, so no one really paid attention. The P.O. boxes had combination locks. You had to spin the dial and then turn right to pull the lock open. Most people didn't spin their locks to a random number after checking their mail, so if you turned right again, the box would open. Cards usually had money in them. We went the most around holidays, but in general, college students get a surprising amount of money sent to them in the mail. We could have gotten into a lot of trouble, and I regret it deeply. But at the time I was living in my car, trying to balance school, clinics, and a crappy job, and wasn't thinking about anyone outside of surviving my situation. I used to steal Magic the Gathering booster packs and sell the high-priced cards back to my local comic shop. I also car-hopped a few times in my teens. Story 23. We were poor growing up, and my mom received food stamps for us for as long as I can remember. Around the age of 12, I realized we were always starving at the end of the month because we went on huge grocery sprees when the 5th rolled around. So I decided she should hide the book of food stamps back when they came in booklets and you had to tear them out so that when we ran out of food and stamps, we would actually have more. So, when it came to the middle of the month and we had no food in sight, I grabbed that book, showed it to my mom, and proudly told her what I had done. I don't think I've ever cried more from a whooping than I did that day. She used anything she could get her hands on to hit me. All my older siblings kept calling me stupid and saying all kinds of things about what I had done. Then they all went grocery shopping with my mom, picked up pizza on the way home, and were thrilled because my mom let them choose what they wanted, and they all got pizza. Story 24. When I was young, I wanted money for pot, so I pawned off a bunch of random stuff around my house, mostly gifts I had received. Instruments, gaming consoles, assorted electronics, anything that was mine that I wouldn't miss. I sold a guitar to a friend, and after getting the money but before giving him the guitar, I sold it to a pawn shop. That really damaged my relationship with someone I'd been friends with since 6th grade. I paid him back and we're still good friends 6 years later. After that well dried up, I started taking things from my parents' garage. One day, I sold about 5 fishing rods that belonged to my ex-stepdad. I went back looking for more items to pawn and grabbed the last fishing rod, which broke when I tried to pack it in my car. I didn't end up selling it, but later found out it had been a gift for my sister's husband. I felt awful, and since I don't fish, I had no explanation for having a broken fishing pole. That was the wake-up call I needed. Gifts mean a lot to me, and the thought that I once valued getting high for a few hours over keeping a permanent reminder of someone's love makes me sick. Though I still smoke occasionally, I no longer sell things for money. In my experience, pawn shops seem to encourage this sort of behavior. I know people who have used them to pay bills and then bought their items back. This is completely irresponsible, as are people who buy tools at a discount from pawn shops. Whenever I pawned multiple unrelated items at once, it must have occurred to the man behind the counter that they probably weren't entirely mine or that I was up to something shady, but he bought them anyway. Story 25. When I was about 10, I lived in a small modular home, a trailer house. There were a total of 4 of these houses next to each other, so I wouldn't classify it as a trailer park. One day, my siblings and I were home alone while our parents were at work, just hanging out. Somehow, my siblings came up with the idea to put me in one of my younger sister's dresses with a pair of snakeskin high-heeled boots, and they offered me $20 to do it. I said, "Heck yeah, I'll do it." But after dressing me up, they added a condition. I had to run to the end of the street and back about a 50-meter stretch. I summoned up my courage and bolted down and back as fast as I could. When I ran into the house in my dress and snakeskin-looking boots, my sister had an old Polaroid camera and snapped a picture. I was furious because I thought she would show it to my dad, which would have been bad. Thankfully, she never did. When I asked for my money, my siblings backed out and kept it. To this day, to my knowledge, my sister still has that picture of me in a dress and boots running into the yard. Story 26. I got paid almost $20,000 extra over my yearly salary to spend 3 months in India, outsourcing a telephony and data call center. I found out several months in advance, had to sign non-disclosure forms left and right, and had to work with people whose jobs were about to be cut. I couldn't say anything about the layoffs, but I found creative ways to offer subtle warnings. For example, one guy excitedly told me that he and his wife had found a house and were about to make an offer. I told him it wasn't the right time to buy. He looked at me a little strangely, and all I could do was repeat myself with as much eyebrow wagging and wide-eyed looks toward the management floor as possible. Yes, I took the money and the free trip, because otherwise I would have been part of the crew that got cut. I stayed with the company for another 3 years, then got laid off. I received a great severance package and a check for $10,000 more to avoid taking the company to court for wrongful dismissal. My wife was pregnant, so I took the check and moved from one temporary job to another until I finally found a far better position down the road. As a final insult, the company eventually closed the offshore call center and rehired many of the laid-off employees at lower salaries and with no benefits. Story 27. I went out to the cheesecake factory with my family, and at the end of dinner, my dad offered $50 if anyone at the table could eat 12 slices of any cheesecake. Being in high school, too young to have a job, and with Skyrim just released, I accepted the challenge without hesitation. As I worked my way through each slice of varying flavors, I felt both disgust at myself and a glimmer of hope at nearing the finish line. By the time I finished the 11th slice, the weight of what I had eaten pressed down on me, but I was in the final stretch of my journey. I was feeling queasy, but I was determined to finish. For the last cheesecake, I chose red velvet because it was one of my favorite desserts at the time, and I assumed it would be a normal-size slice. When it arrived, I quickly realized a mistake had been made. They brought out the largest cheesecake slice I had ever seen. From memory, I could swear it had a layer of red velvet and a layer of cheesecake. It took me somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes to slowly eat it, but in the end, I emerged victorious. I earned my $50 and my copy of Skyrim, but in the process, I lost the ability to enjoy what had once been one of my favorite desserts. Even years later, I still can't enjoy cheesecake. Story 28. A long while ago, I was legitimately homeless in the French Quarter of New Orleans for a few months. One day, a friend of mine, who had a job that nobody knew about and we never asked, came to me and asked if I wanted to do powder with him. I politely declined. We kind of stopped speaking for a while after that. About a month later, he met up with me and some other friends to hang out. Apparently being high, he told me that although he identified as a straight man, he used to be a dancer at one of the gay nightclubs on Bourbon Street. He said he would often go into the back rooms with customers and let them on extra service for money, claiming the customers just want to play. Nothing's super intimate, and it's not gay if you don't get to the finish line. This story was confirmed by the actual owner of the bar, who ran into our group on the street one day and asked my friend if he was finally off the smack. The owner added, "You're not working for me again after what you did, but I don't want to open the paper one day and see that they found you passed away." Story 29. I used to do quite a bit of powder, and anything else that was water-soluble for that matter. So obviously, I've done some pretty screwed up stuff. The funny thing is, I am from Baltimore and did the whole homeless junkie thing, but I was so far down the hole that I couldn't really muster up anything too extreme besides holding a sign and begging for money. I went to West Palm Beach in my mid-20s to get clean. It's known as the rehab capital of the world. You can probably guess that a lot of people leave rehab early. It was full of people my age in a place where they didn't know how to hustle, so most turned to retail theft. I had one friend down there who had acquaintances living in hotels with a dealer couple. Every day they would go out for about 8 hours with a long list from people around town of items they wanted. They would hit several malls and stores and steal the items. Well, my friend got evicted and moved back to Baltimore, so I figured I would work with them because I was out of my mind and had a terrible addiction. Every time you successfully stole something from a store, there was powder waiting for you in the car when you got out clean. I dropped 40 pounds in a couple of months and had become an obvious shoplifter by that point. I am honestly glad I went to jail. It took a couple more tries when I got back to Baltimore, but I've finally been clean for a couple of years now. Story 30. I met a girl online through a pole fitness thread. I was teaching pole at the time and traveling through her city with a friend, a Canadian backpacking through Europe. She said she was interested in a private lesson. Being young and dumb, I said, "Sure, whatever." My friend and I parted ways at the train station. I did give her the girl's address, phone number, forum username, and the contact info of a friend who also used the forum. The girl was transgender, had run away from home, and was working as a dancer to make money. I knew all of that beforehand, but the reality didn't hit me until I was in her apartment. She lived in a building where each floor shared a bathroom, and her apartment was a studio with a kitchenette. It contained a twin bed, 2 chairs, a small table, and a pole. Words of affirmation like, "You're a star," "You're amazing," and "You are worthy," were written on paper and taped all around the apartment. Cheap makeup and clothing were scattered everywhere. Anyway, I taught the lesson as promised, just very basic moves since she needed a lot of work. I gave her things to practice. She cried and said she felt beautiful and like a girl. She told me about where she worked and how excited she was to hopefully make more money with her new moves. She paid me, and I left. It was really screwed up because it was extremely stupid of me. I literally walked into a stranger's apartment building in a foreign country without even knowing what she looked like. I just assumed she was a real person because we had interacted loosely in the thread for months before I announced my trip. I didn't even have my BlackBerry on me, since roaming charges were awful. The whole experience also messed me up because seeing the state of her apartment and watching her cry about feeling beautiful really got to me. I had lived a relatively sheltered and privileged life, and this was a reality that I was not prepared for. Story 31. When I was homeless, I hung around with other homeless people. It was really interesting, lots of different cliches, some worse than others. It was like school, but all adults or young adults. I quickly realized who to avoid and learned where the junkies hid their stash at night. Since we were all living out of a homeless shelter, I waited until everyone was in for the night. It was the middle of winter, around -10 degrees Celsius. I stayed out all night, nearly froze to death, but managed to score more than 10 hypodermic needles and the powder to go with them. This was not my proudest moment, but it got me $300, and apparently the person it belonged to cleaned up shortly after, so I don't feel too bad about it. I am not sure if I got undercut, but I gave them to a friend who was better connected than me in the underground side of my city. If he took a seller's fee, I really can't blame him. Story 32. When I was 21, I worked in structural reinforcing steel for almost 6 months. This was my first heavy construction job, and it was pretty messed up. Most of my coworkers were ex-cons, addicts, people with mental illnesses, and the occasional homeless person looking for a quick buck. Almost all of them had terrible attitudes. They begged me for cigarettes. Some of these guys never even brought lunch. They hassled me all day for being small, not very strong, young, green, and literally anything else they could think of. They would steal my stuff or other people's belongings. They showed up drunk, high, hungover, or even puking, you name it. I could write a book about all the crazy things I've seen in construction, and an entire half of it would be filled with the jerks I worked alongside in rebar alone. I hated them. And it didn't take long for me to realize that one of them would be the reason I got hurt on the job if I stayed. Some were drunk at work, high on drugs, or just plain jerks when it came to dangerous tasks. Worst of all, they bullied each other, including me, into doing sketchy things. Whether it was using a chop saw with a handle broken and cracked in a million places, or ramming 35-meter bars through holes drilled in structural concrete too fast, risking serious injury, they didn't care. Their attitude was, "We're tough degenerate morons," and proud of it. The other trades on these jobs avoided them or just talked crap about them. They were a-holes. Nobody liked them. I hated that job and quit after 6 months. When I say quit, I mean I undid my tool belt one day while we were tying a rebar mat, threw it on the ground along with my hard hat, and walked off. I didn't look back, nor did I ever speak to any of those pieces of crap ever again. Screw heavy construction like that, especially the losers who do it with their addictions, criminal records, and grade 9 educations. I am glad there's a place in society for degenerate idiots like that, at the bottom of the hole tying steel in the rain where they belong. If you think I am being too harsh or bitter, I don't care. You don't understand what I went through in certain jobs. Literally 90% of it was doing rebar. I was 21 then. I am 35 now and still in trades, just not ones filled with troglodytes and jerks. I've done construction work since I was 15, still in high school. During the summers, jobs and projects come and go, but I'll never forget the 6 months I spent tying steel. It felt like being in jail or on a chain gang. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.